Good evening and welcome to Making Space, Bridging the Gap in Clinical Trials for Women of Color Town Hall Series powered by For the Breast of Us and Count Me In. Also, a special thank you to our additional sponsor, Seagen. My name is Reverend Dr. Tammy Denise. I am a 19-year breast cancer survivor. I am the co-founder of Carrie's Touch, a breast cancer organization that's focused on serving Black women. I'm also the co-principal investigator for Project SOAR, speaking our African American realities, a research project in partnership with UCLA. This study is designed to understand the unique experiences that Black women have who are navigating a breast cancer journey, and also looking at the strong Black woman syndrome and its impact on the decisions we make while undergoing treatment for cancer. Welcome. We are excited to have you with us this evening. Our panelists are ready to answer questions. Get your questions ready, put them in the chat if you have questions at any point, and at the end, we'll reserve time to take some of the questions. We are also excited to see so many of you joining. Come on in the room. I'd like to thank Marissa Thomas for inviting me to moderate this session. And without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Michelle Anderson Benjamin, also known as the Fearless Warrior, a mother of two from New York City. At the age of 36, during the pandemic, Michelle was diagnosed with stage 1 triple-negative breast cancer. And unfortunately, 2 years later, her cancer advanced to stage 4. As a metastatic ambassador for the organization For the Breast of Us, Michelle educates others about the importance of advocating for herself, for yourself, and using her journey to be the voice of the voiceless. Michelle is currently enrolled in a clinical trial. Next, we have Miranda Gonzalez. Miranda is a mother, a patient advocate for the Breast of Us, a baddie ambassador, and an employee of SHARE Cancer Support. She's very active in all realms of the breast cancer community, with a focus on young women of color and people thriving with metastatic breast cancer. Marissa was also diagnosed with early stage breast cancer at age 40 and has also participated in a clinical trial. And rounding out our patient advocates, we have April Finley. She's also a baddie ambassador and the community engagement coordinator for the Breast of Us. She is a project lead, graduate, and patient advocate. She was diagnosed with early stage triple-negative breast cancer at age 35 and has participated in research studies for the advancement of breast cancer survivorship. Rounding out our panel is Dr. Nick Wagle. He is the Vice President and Head of Translational Medicine at Genentech. He is also formerly the director of Count Me In, a patient-partnered cancer research initiative based out of the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, an oncologist and researcher at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and associate professor at Harvard Medical School. His work has focused on translational genomics and precision medicine, with a particular interest in metastatic breast cancer. Oh, that's a mouthful. Welcome to all of you brilliant panelists. Thank you for being here this evening. We're going to be talking about a very serious topic, but I do want us to relax. And even though we're on Zoom, we are all in our respective homes. And let's act like we're just sitting around the table, having a cup of tea or our favorite beverage, having a conversation about breast cancer and clinical trials with people of color. We'll kick off our questions. Is it okay for me to call you Dr. Nick? You're on mute. Let's everybody go ahead and unmute so we don't have to do the you're on mute.
Dr. Nick is great, or just Nick is fine.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Oh, and I don't know that I mentioned that I also participated in a clinical trial as well. So, Dr. Nick, let's go ahead and give you that credit. And I want to level set this conversation because we're talking about clinical trials, we're talking about research. Tell us, what is a clinical trial? Talk to me like you're sitting at home with your mama and your sister or your wife.
Great. Well, thanks for that question, and thanks for having this event. It's really great, and it's great to be here with all of you. I think we can distinguish between a couple of different things that often I think people get confused about. The first is participating in research, right? We talk about research, and I think we use that word a lot, but not every research means. So maybe I'll start there with research is the act by which scientists, physicians, investigators ask questions that we don't know the answer to and collect data in order to try and be able to answer those questions to try and ultimately improve the care of patients. And so there are all kinds of different kinds of research that we do, that others do, that many patients have participated in. One type of research is a clinical trial. A clinical trial is a type of research where a patient provides some information. It might be data, it might be specimens, it might be participation in by taking a particular medicine. And so a clinical trial is something where we try to actually determine the best possible treatments for patients. And then the specific type of clinical trial that we're often talking about, and I think we're going to talk a lot about more today, is the clinical trial where people are actually taking a new medicine, an experimental medicine, a medicine that hasn't been proven to work in people before. And those are called interventional or therapeutic clinical trials. And that's the kind of clinical trial we often think about when we think about clinical research, which is when you get, there's a new medicine, like the medicine that pharmaceutical companies make, and we don't yet know if it works, or we don't yet know who it works in. We don't yet know which cancers it might treat. And patients participating in those types of therapeutic clinical trials may take that medicine, and the physicians and the investigators studying that medicine follow them and see, does it work? Is it working? Is it safe? Does it have side effects? Is it easy to take? What are the other benefits? What are the other risks? And at the end, determine whether that new drug is as good or better than the standard of care that we have. And that's how new drugs get approved. And so I guess my point is that's a specific type of research, a specific type of trial called a therapeutic clinical trial. But we should remember also that there are many other trials and other types of research that people can participate in.
Wow, that's a big response. I'm not sure that was quite kitchen table talk, but we'll start to break it down a little bit more. Oops. We'll start to break it down a little bit more as we go along in the conversation, because for me, my goal is when we leave this conversation, the people on the chat with us or on the call with us really can wrap their minds around the concept of a clinical trial beyond what we know in the Black community. Especially, you hear clinical trials, the first thing you hear is Tuskegee, and everybody's like, deuces, I'm out, right? And so we want to acknowledge that those things happened, and we want to acknowledge that there is good in participating in a clinical trial as well, whether it's a therapeutic trial or whether it's a study like the one that we're doing with UCLA, and looking at it's an intervention, but it's around well-being. It's not testing a drug. So thank you for that response. Miranda, did you know about clinical trials before you decided to participate in one? I just want that to be a yes or no. Did you know about clinical trials before you decided to participate in one?
I did, yes.
Okay, wonderful. What were some of the preconceptions, your thoughts or feelings about clinical trials and even clinical research before you participated?
I think kind of the same thing as anyone else, like you're scared of the side effects of what this new drug is going to do to you. That's probably the biggest hindrance, I think, for people wanting to start a clinical trial.
So why did you ultimately say yes?
Because I this is going to sound kind of cheesy, but I really felt like it was my duty as a member of the breast cancer community that I had made it to where I was, and I wanted to do something that I thought would help women that were coming after me.
Mm-hmm. Did you have difficulties within the trial? Was your trial a tough one?
It was. I was on Ibrance for 2 years. It was a PALIS study, so they wanted to see if giving women who were who had early stage breast cancer, if they would benefit from having Ibrance to extend disease-free survival. I always get those words mixed up. But unfortunately, no, it didn't show any benefit. The biggest drawback was that it caused neutropenia, which I think a lot of the class of drugs, they're called CDK4 inhibitors, and a lot of them do tend to kind of lower your white blood count. So that was the biggest drawback. I also didn't have health insurance at the time, so that was a benefit to me doing the trial, because then I knew I would see my doctor more often than even if I had health insurance, because they wanted to monitor me while I was on the trial.
That's smart. That's using the system to your advantage. Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you for your contribution. Let's see. We're gonna next go to Michelle. You're currently enrolled in a clinical trial. Do you talk to others within your community about your experience of participating in a clinical trial?
Yes, I actually document my journey from the very beginning. I started my trial last year in October, when I found that I was stage 4, and also spoke about the importance of knowing your markers. Oftentimes we just know our subtype and our cancer type, and not the other, bracket that make up us eligible for certain drugs like our PD-L1, how mutations happen, how those things play a factor. So I advocate for, I speak about my journey on social media at every, conversation or panel that I'm at, even in my cancer treatment rooms. Just my presence on social media. I've had patients that have come up to me at treatment and say, I listened to your story. I actually transferred my doctor to your doctor. I'm starting to educate myself more on different options that I have, and having these conversations with my physicians.
Wow. Wonderful. Thank you for that. And thank you for your contribution, because it's bold for us to actually go through a treatment, journey ourselves. And while we are helping others, along the way, and to be so vulnerable. So thank you for what you're doing. I know you said that a lot of people, have changed their doctors over to your doctors. What on social media, what are people saying when they see your story?
So I try to make, I'm a fun person. I'm Michelle. I like to have a good time. So regardless if I'm having a good day or a bad day, I'm gonna make the best out of anything that's coming my way. I'm also a family person. Anyone that knows me knows I have 2 children, and they know that my sidekick is my 6-year-old daughter. And I'm a firm believer that our children watch how we move, and they model what we do. So in my way of handling things is being a mentor for her. I have to show her how to push through things and be resilient. So I incorporate her in my journey. But what I do is I educate people in a fun way about, I document every time I have treatment. I document, when I have my CAT scans. I have CAT scans every 6 weeks. My last recent CAT scan, they see no evidence of metastatic disease. And these are things that we have to, we should have to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, because, trials are just what they are. But I always tell people it's when you go through this journey, it's like you have to jump out of the plane without a parachute and just hope you land on your feet. So if you're going to take a chance on anybody, take a chance on yourself.
Girl, you better say it. What is the offering plate? You better say a word. Wait, I need that to be a meme. You said you better jump out of, what did you say? Jump out of the plane? What?
So living with cancer in general is like
no, I
living
want the quote. I don't want
I'm going to give you the quote. Okay.
Give me that quote, because that was fire.
It's jumping out the plane without a parachute and hoping you land on your feet.
Woo, okay. Wow. Okay, go ahead with your explanation. I'll give you 10 more seconds.
So the message of that is that you don't know what this journey is going to look like at the end. All you know is that you want to be known that you fought through it.
Wow. Woo, I have chills. I have chills. Thank you so much. I don't know who wants to follow her, but I'm going to say Dr. Nick. Dr. Nick, why is it important for us to have this and other conversations about clinical research and clinical trials? And what role do you think patients and members of the larger breast cancer community can play in clinical research and clinical trials?
It's a great question. I think, why is it important? Well, because as you heard kind of from the last couple of answers, the only way we are going to continue to get better treatments, and the only way we're going to continue to get treatments that work for every individual, is to make sure that we are studying drugs in every patient. So if people of color have not been included in studies before, even if we know a drug works, we don't necessarily know it works well in people of color. And that's happened, right? We have drugs on the market, but if the drug hasn't been tested and the drug hasn't been developed with everyone in mind, then we don't know that everyone's gonna respond equally to that drug.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really important just for us to make sure that every person can get the best possible treatment, that our studies, our clinical trials, are representative
Mm-hmm.
of all the people who ultimately get the disease.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. And then the second part of your question, why is it important for people, for patients, for the community to participate, is exactly the kinds of also questions we heard and what we're seeing show up in the chat, which is that sometimes doctors or pharmaceutical companies or the industry, they don't always know what's important to people, to patients.
Mm-hmm.
They don't always know what the barriers are. They don't always know what is preventing people from enrolling on trials, or why they might not be interested in enrolling on trials. Maybe they've never heard of Tuskegee, right? Maybe they've never participated in a conversation like this. And so if we don't have patients out there advocating for themselves, if we don't have the community saying, this is what's important to us, this is why it's important to us, this is why we are not participating in that trial, this is why that trial was a bad experience for me, then we're not going to make progress. So I think I really am a strong believer in patients and patient advocates having a big say in how we do research and how we conduct clinical trials. And I think we've done a lot better in the last few years, but we have a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of that saying that we are our own rescue. We are our own answer to our own prayers, because I think about my clinical trial, right? When my doctor asked me to participate in a clinical trial, and I asked him, how were women that look like me responded in this trial? And he said, I don't know. And I was 39 years old. I said, you can't come into this office and tell me that you have a possible treatment to address this breast cancer, and you don't know how women that look like me are responding. And that's when I got involved 19 years ago. And that's when I started attending research conferences. And that's when I also found out that if you don't have a minimum of 2% in any clinical trial, then you can't even study that group as a subset. Mm-hmm. So I participated in my class. I wasn't as astute as Michelle or Miranda, and you'll hear from April in a second. I got pissed. I was angry because I wasn't included in these trials and trying to be part of the answer. I wasn't even a thought. So let me get off my soapbox. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying. So April, in your opinion, what research sources can researchers or other scientists give back to the communities with which they engage?
Well, some of the things that these companies can do or researchers can do is, compensate people for their time, for this information. Information is not free. If we want to also establish trust, giving incentives such as like gas cards or food vouchers, or for those who have children who can't afford to have them participate in extracurricular activities, give them gift cards for things like that, or invite them to a weekend experience for kids whose parents are in treatment, and then send the parents on a getaway. There's all kind of things that can be done. But the first thing that has to be done is you have to establish trust, because especially in communities of color, there's a lot of shame. We have been taken advantage of in studies. So you're going to have to, there has to be trust established in order for us to be interested to participate in a clinical trial once we learn about them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's beautiful. And I'm going to take it back to Dr. Nick, because there is a question that I received in the chat that asked about, is it safe? Is it safe being one of the questions that, we're exploring? People want to know. When I hear safe, I think of unsafe. Can you speak more about the safety of participating in a clinical trial to back up, what April is also talking about?
Yeah. Safety is certainly one of the big questions and one of the big concerns I know for many patients. What you hear is, I don't want to be a guinea pig. I don't want to be experimented on. If this drug isn't approved, I don't necessarily want to take it until the drug is approved. And all that's very legitimate. Those are very legitimate concerns, because the truth is, when we're doing clinical trials and testing new drugs, one of the questions we are asking is this drug safe? Is it safe enough for us to give people? We have a lot of safeguards in place, right? So we're not just giving it to people and then saying, see you in a couple of years and we'll see if it was safe, right? People are followed very closely. The earlier a drug is in development, the more questions we have about it, the more closely someone is followed. In the beginning, they start with very small doses of the drug, and they increase the doses of the drug very slowly to make sure that people can tolerate it. So there are ways that safety is paid attention to.
Mm-hmm.
But safety is one of the questions, and I think it's a perfectly reasonable question to ask. How is my safety going to be attended to? And what's going to happen if this drug is not safe, or what's going to happen if there are extra side effects, and what is going to be the outcome? And that's the conversation that patients should be having with their doctors or with the researchers to reassure them that everyone's looking out for them, that these drugs, while they are experimental or while they're being tested, the patient safety is first in everyone's mind. And I will tell you, in my experience, that is true. Patient safety is first, and we wouldn't do anything if it jeopardized patient safety. And so, but people need to be reassured about that.
Absolutely. I tested the drug. You'll never remember adriamycin, but if you Googled the Red Devil, that's the drug that I tested. I tested the efficacy of whether or not it was better to be administered every 21 days or every 14 days. Wow. I was randomized into the every 14-day group. And so what we know is the standard of care today is every 21 days. So you can imagine how brutal that drug was. But I think it was Miranda who talked about how her doctors were right there with her every step of the way, making sure that they were keeping an eye on her. And because she didn't have insurance, she actually got better care. And I think that I had that same experience of I had insurance, but just better care and their eyes on me in ways that I don't think that they would have had I not been in the trial. So, Dr. Nick, thank you for saying that safety is our number one priority. A follow-up question to you, Dr. Nick, is how can medical professionals make clinical research and trials more accessible for those who might not be able to participate otherwise?
Yes, that's the question of the moment. I think people who run clinical trials, whether they're academic investigators or pharmaceutical companies, recognize that I would go as far as saying the current system is broken, right? That the way we're doing clinical trials right now does not enable diversity of participation. It's not accessible to many patients. You have to drive 300 miles. You have to be cared for at a big comprehensive academic cancer center. You may not be able to get parking, all the things that were raised earlier. I think the current clinical trial system requires a lot of work. And so you saw in the answers to the chat, I think being able to hear from advocates about what would make trials more accessible to more patients is worthwhile. Like, we need to hear it. We need to hear what needs to happen. And I think the other thing is, and I would love to hear from the other panelists about this, there's a misconception around people's willingness to participate in trials. I think that a lot of physicians or researchers may assume that patients, particularly patients of color, don't want to participate in trials, and maybe don't even ask, or don't even provide the opportunity or explain it. And so I think we need to address that. We need to both educate physicians and researchers to go out there and make trials accessible, make the option there. And we need our patient advocates to go out there and say that we to encourage physicians and investigators to tell patients about trials.
Absolutely. And I think For the Breast of Us did a survey, an online social media survey, and they asked if people had participated in a clinical trial. They asked a question about clinical trials. And the point that I'm really trying to make is that it was 100% no. Either the people hadn't participated in clinical trials, they didn't know about a clinical trial. And that is highly problematic. You know, when we talk about patient access, we can't participate in things that we don't know about. And that's why it is so important to have these patients and panelists on this call today. So April, let me ask you, why did you become a patient advocate to participate in the clinical research?
Well, one of the reasons that I became a patient advocate is because I come from a long line of breast cancer and reproductive cancer survivors. But I was the first in my family as an unwed woman with no children to be diagnosed premenopausal, as well as having a genetic mutation, which left me highly susceptible to developing reproductive cancer. So I said all of that to say there was a lot of secrets in my family as far as talking about our health, and just even sharing the basic information as of go and make sure you get a mammogram, even though you're under 40, you still should have it done because of X, Y, and Z. And when I was diagnosed in 2016, I had a very difficult time finding someone who looked like me to help me through my journey. It took me meeting someone through social media who was, about my age, but she also she found out she had cancer while she was pregnant. But it was very difficult to find women of color who would talk about what was going on with them. So I made a vow that, once I got through my treatments and I was stable, that I would I would be an advocate for others. I would be a voice to the voiceless, and I would also not be ashamed to share my story, because there's nothing to be ashamed about.
Absolutely.
And I just kind of want to go back on something that was mentioned as far as some of our doctors don't feel like we're interested in participating in clinical trials. Some of our doctors think that's a last resort. I remember asking my oncologist about clinical trials, and he distinctly said, well, we're not there yet, so we don't need to worry about that. Okay. So then, that made me wonder, but he was the best. Obviously, I'm still here. But, I also wonder about how much information do some of our doctors have when it comes to clinical trials.
Right. And bedside manner, right? It's about knowing about various cultures. It's about knowing language and the cultural competency around things that you say and just don't say to anyone. And because of all of the barriers and challenges that we face as patients of color, as Black women, really, that was the best response you could come through out of 8 years of medical school, 12 years of medical school, becoming an oncologist. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your commitment to speaking out and using your voice. This question is to all of the panelists. What are barriers? What are some of the barriers, in your opinion? How can researchers and scientists help break down those barriers of access and make participating in their science more accessible and more attractive? Let's go with Michelle to start.
One of the ways to bridge that gap is by having conversations with actual patients. I've sat on different panels where I've spoken with researchers and doctors and gave my perspective on what they can do better to communicate to patients. You know, oftentimes oncologists, they want to talk over your head. You know, that's not the conversation you and I need to have. And even from a patient perspective, even when speaking with patients as an advocate, you know, teaching them there's different methods of communication. You might not be comfortable speaking with your doctor right there in that room, but you know how to write your questions down on a piece of paper. You know how to send an email through the portal and say, these are the questions that I have. You know, can you have them answered by the next time I come to my next appointment? You know, there's different ways to advocate for yourself. But one of the things that I've learned in my journey is you have to let your team know who you are.
Yeah.
And how you function. Because the reality of it is that you're in a relationship with them. They have to understand you and you have to understand them. And you can't be ashamed to ask questions and you can't be ashamed to speak on how you feel. You know, you have to, you know, for me, I'm a big person. I like my life balance. Cancer is not my life. So although, you know, I'm metastatic and I go to treatment every 3 weeks, I came to my doctors with a year calendar. Like, I got things going on in my life. And some of these days ain't going to work out. So we need to figure something out because there's some things that are non-negotiable that I'm not canceling for cancer. And they have to understand that you're more than just your illness.
That is such a beautiful answer. And here's a shameless plug to the organization that I am the co-founder, Carrie's Touch. We have an app. Right now it's only on Apple, but our app is called Carrie's Touch. And we have a feature on that app called Before You Go. And it's talking exactly about what you just mentioned, Michelle, about making sure that you are prepared when you go into your doctor's office, because you have a short amount of time. Doctors see just an ungodly amount of patients, and because doctors are patients too, not patients, people too. And you know, not that it's our job to cater to the doctor and whatever is going on with the doctor, because we are there to be served in that moment. But I think it does do us good to acknowledge that they are humans. They make mistakes. They don't have sometimes they don't have all of the answers. But if we can do like we're doing now and bridge that gap and build healthy patient-physician relationships, then the patient at the end of the day has a better outcome, because, you know, we're the spoken out ones. What about the patients who are a little more reserved, who are a little quieter, who don't come in with a year-long calendar and say, I got stuff to do. Doctor, cancer is not ruling my life. I'm going to have you, Miranda, chime in on this conversation right now, because you are more of a quiet patient. Not saying that you're a pushover, but I don't think you walked into your doctor's office with a year-long calendar saying, look, dude, cancer gonna have to get on my calendar because I'm not getting on cancer's calendar.
You're very correct. I did not do that. In fact, in a lot of Latino cultures, you don't question the doctor. You take what they say because the doctor's God. You know, they went to school, they know more than you. You take what they say and you don't ask questions. So it's taken me time being around these lovely women and just learning how to, I mean, that's the basis of advocacy, just asking questions. But to go back to what you said, I think if researchers want more people to be involved, similar to what April said, they need to have incentives for patients. So for the trial that I did, they offered parking vouchers. And as anyone knows, parking at a hospital all day can get to be very expensive. So that was a really easy way for me to participate. So while I was doing that, I was approached to do another trial, and it was related to like intimacy and topical estrogen, you know, that kind of stuff. I didn't have insurance, and that organization, that company would not let me be in their clinical trial because I didn't have health insurance. Now, if you want a broad, diverse pool of people, I mean, I don't understand why you wouldn't just have anyone who wants to be in the trial to be involved. So I was very disappointed about that. It could have helped a lot of people.
Thank you so much. I think we'll have to, Marissa, can we have a follow-up to this? You can put it in the chat because I think you just opened up an entire can of worms when you said, I don't understand why anyone that wants to be in a trial can be in a trial. That's a whole different conversation that we don't have time to unpack. I see you, Dr. Nick, shaking your head. Chime in to this conversation.
Well, so on that, I agree. There are lots of barriers that don't need to be there around, who can and can't participate in a trial. And maybe there are some good reasons for some of them, but I think Miranda's right that that ultimately, one, you're blocking people who want to participate in a trial from participating, but then two, you are then working against what we are all talking about, which is making sure that there's sufficient representation and inclusion in the results of the trial so that we can actually extrapolate the findings to all people. So yeah, I think it's a big important issue. I wanted to say something on the previous topic too about trust and about barriers. I agree with everything that's been said, but one of the things I learned from all the patients who I met in Count Me In is that it wasn't enough, and it's not enough for us to just open the door and for us to just say we'd like people to participate. We're welcoming people. We welcome Black women with breast cancer to be part of the study, or we want people of color to participate. That was not enough, and it's not enough. And that there's this whole trust element, and that it's really on the researchers, it's really on the physicians and researchers to work on and build that trust. So that's point one. The other point is we talk a lot about diversity in participation, but one of the ways to build trust, again, I learned from all the patients in Count Me In, is to make sure that we have diversity in the research team, diversity in the study team, the researchers, so that patients can talk to people who have some shared experience, who look like them, who understand, as you said earlier, the cultural competencies. And I think that's a big problem in medical research and clinical trials, which is we don't have sufficient diversity on the research side. And that's another thing we got to be working on in parallel.
That's so beautiful. I mean, because that was my next question to you. How can medical providers help to bridge the gap between communities of colors and the participation in clinical trials? And you just nailed it right there. The research that I'm doing with UCLA, it was important for us to have an all Black women spACE, and my co-PI, she's a white woman, and I told her she wasn't invited into the conversation. No matter how cool she is, no matter how woke she is, no matter how much she gets it, just by her being in the room changes the dynamics of the conversation, and it really does make it about her and not the women and the women's voices in the room. So I mean, are you reading my questions, Dr. Nick? I was like, that's my question right there for you. But do you want to say anything more about, how we close that gap?
No, I think people are now aware of the gap.
Yeah.
And we're starting, and both academic institutions and pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies are starting to think about how to do it. I think, frankly, people are struggling with it. And I think it's a long process because it's about, it's about recruiting people and training people when they're in high school, right? Because you're trying to train a new workforce.
Yep.
I hope that there is widespread buy-in to the need to do that, because it's going to take a big coordinated effort over many years.
Right. And so what do you think about, so you said training people when they're in high school. We know that the pipeline to prison starts actually in 3rd grade. So by the time you're in 3rd grade, they can tell what the trajectory of your life will be. And so do you think high school is still even a tad bit too late, that we potentially should start talking to kids younger than that to get them, kids of color, to get them interested in the medical field?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I mean, I am not an expert in this, and so the earlier the better. But people who know more than me about this need to help the medical profession do this with recruiting and adding important diversity to the research community.
Wonderful. So I think this question is from our audience, and I'm not sure if this is directed to you, Dr. Nick. I am interested in a clinical trial at Duke. Should I contact Duke myself or reach out to my physician instead?
Yeah, I think both are reasonable. I think if you feel comfortable with your physician, that's a good place to start. If
Okay.
you're not getting anywhere with the physician, or the physician doesn't know how to help you, then contacting Duke directly would be a good second option. I would not stop at one. I would try both, whichever you feel more comfortable with first. If that doesn't work, do the other.
Okay, wonderful. And so here's another question that probably is the same answer to whomever asked this question. They said that, what's a good place to look for clinical trials? I went to clinicaltrials.gov and got overwhelmed, and the site isn't super user or patient friendly. And I can concur with that. I'm deep in this work, and I need to go back to school to understand clinicaltrials.gov.
My former answer would have been talk to your doctor, but I bet you everyone on this panel has a much better answer than that, because I think the new advocacy groups, that to me is now the current go-to source. There's so many amazing patient advocates and advocacy groups that can help with this. So I would defer to my fellow panelists on this one.
Okay, great. Panelists, any thoughts about where this patient can go to participate in a clinical trial?
Well, one place that you can go, the Dr. Susan Love Foundation, they have a website where you can put in your information, and it'll give you a list of clinical trials that are happening that you may be interested in participating in. Also, you can look at if you're taking any kind of drugs. You can go to whoever their manufacturer is, go on their website, and there's a link there for clinical trials. There's several of them. But and then when we look at TV, our commercials, you can't even tell that it's a commercial about a drug or a medication, because you got people sitting on the porch drinking lemonade. And if you're not listening, you're not paying attention to what they're saying, but oftentimes they are commercials for new drugs. So those are ways that you can kind of get involved with clinical trials. Also being a part of different social media groups, and for the rest of us in our private Facebook group, we drop information about clinical trials all the time in there. So just making connections, building community and networking, you can get the information outside of your doctor's office.
Wonderful. Michelle, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, other organizations like Touch BBC, Tiger Lily Foundation, they all have links on their websites that you can put your subtype, your stage, and if you know your immuno markers, and it can filter clinical trials that work for you, that pertain to your particular illness, your particular cancer, and then you can have that conversation with your oncologist.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, thank you. Miranda, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think everybody pretty much covered it. April,
Okay.
took it and just ran with it, and Michelle was the cherry on top.
That is exactly my sentiments.
But I also want to, if I can just add real quick, another thing I just want to encourage people is don't be scared. If you do find a trial that you're interested in, and it might not be at your hospital, and you have a conversation with your doctors, find out where other hospitals have it. For me, my particular trial was not at my hospital, and I was ready to go to MD Anderson, and my doctor was like, wait a minute, let me, we're going to fight to get it here. And, I was lucky enough, they were able to get my hospital to approve the trial in 3 weeks. And I was the first person randomized for the trial in New York City for the trial that I'm in. So, don't be scared if the trial is not in your hospital or in your area. If you're serious and you want to fight for your life, you have to let them know, like, you're willing to do whatever is necessary to get the help that you need and get the treatment that you deserve. And you'd be surprised how your doctors be willing to tap in and to get on that train with you.
Michelle, I'm going to need you to add something else to that calendar that you have. I'm going to need some t-shirts with some memes on it. I mean, this sister just dropped straight knowledge. I'm like, what? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Here's another question for our from our audience. I wanted to do a clinical trial, but then my family was so against it and it deterred me. I know you all have spoken a lot about trust, but what are some suggestions you have for us when talking to our families? Oh, this is a good one. I'm going to start with you, Miranda.
I would say explain to your family why it's important to you. Why do you feel the need to participate? Kind of like I mentioned with and a lot of other women that I meet. We're trying to pay it forward, right? Which is kind of what I talked about before. But also take your family member with you. Take everyone to the doctor's appointments. In Mexican families, it is very common that you have, 5 or 6 people that go with you to your appointments. So have the doctor explain to your family members, what's the benefit? What are they hoping to find by, at the end of the study? Why would they want you to participate? Show the list of all the people, obviously not their names, but you can ask the doctor how many people that look like me have been in the trial. Let your family know that we're underrepresented and that's why you want to participate. I know a lot of times families, obviously they just want the best for us and they want to make sure that we're safe and taken care of. But we are the ones that are living with this diagnosis. We are the ones that are trying to get through survivorship. And so ultimately it's our decision as patients to decide what's best for us. And not let our families kind of dictate what they think is best for us, unfortunately.
Thank you so much. April or Michelle want to respond to that question about families?
My family, my main people that really I needed to make sure understood were my kids. My son is, 16, so he was old enough to come. He's old enough to come with me to my appointments and meet my doctors. My daughter is 6. So, and my daughter, has more questions than anybody in my family, and she's going to ask those questions. So, it's having a medical team that understands what's important to you. And what was important to me was that my daughter was able to ask her questions. Mm-hmm. So she was approved to come in as a little researcher. She came in with her notebook and her notes, and she asked the doctor a lot of questions, and she asked the researcher a lot of questions, and she was serious about how she felt. And she wanted them to understand that, she's concerned about her mom, but she also wants to make sure her mom is following instructions. And how could she help at home, to help with her mom? But she also understands that because of my diagnosis at 25, she has to get mammograms because I have, genetics. I'm triple negative and I don't carry any genes. So she wanted to understand, so how do I start that process of learning about my body even at 6? She does her own self-breast exam. She calls it, checks her buttons. But she wanted them to understand that, yes, the education needs to start as early as 6, especially when you're a young woman watching your mom go through this journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At 6, so how old is she now?
She's 6. She was 3 when I was first diagnosed.
She was 3. Oh, wow. Wow.
But she knows, I spoke with her, like my daughter, everyone will tell you, Orsett is on the money. She knows, and she checks her buttons every night. She knows how to talk about, her mom's journey. She comes with me to conventions. She introduces herself to different people. She's there and present. And, some people would say, well, are you giving her too much? And my response is always, kids are smarter than we think. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And sometimes we want them to hear it from us sometimes and not hear from Google or someone else. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's not to scare them, because at the end of the day, unfortunately, mom has cancer, but it's not something mom's ashamed about. This is mom's life. This is something that, mom has to live with. But you also show your kids how you're resilient in that journey as well, how you're thriving, how you're basically making cancer just what it is, a part of your story, not your story. Right. It also teaches them those tools in life that when obstacles come, you just don't fall victim to it.
Absolutely. And I think we know our children, right? Mm-hmm. And we know what children can handle what is, that's your only baby, right?
I have a 16-year-old son.
Okay. And so, probably probably a different journey, a different conversation, a different experience with your 16-year-old son, or if he was, 13 at the time. I have 3 children, and I talk to them all very differently about my journey. And you have the ones that are more vocal about it than others. And I think we know our children. I don't think you're out here making your daughter a breast cancer advocate. She just a force within herself, and you recognize it, and you're pouring into it. And so, and I want to chime in on that question about, our families. Some family members are need to know family members, right? Because you don't want a family member in the doctor's office with you who's going to be scared, who's going to be crying. You are taking your best warriors to battle with you when you go into that doctor's office. You build your team who acknowledge that these doctors, they may have information that we don't have, but they're humans, and this is our lives, and we get to say how we want to show up in that space. My family wanted me to quit my trial. Like I said, I was randomized for every 14 days. So my body never had a chance to replenish from the drugs. And my family thought that this medicine was killing me, and they wanted me to stop. But I was so determined that if I die, they're going to have information on one Black girl, and I'm glad I didn't stop. They said I wasn't going to be here in 5 years. I'm almost 19, on this journey. So I think we give to our families members who can handle it. Those ones is, you got the girlfriend and she take off that earring, she, grease up, right. That's the one you take into the doctor's office. And the rest of them, you just tell them, just pray for me, because everybody can't handle it. So, we are coming to the end of our time. I'm going to set my timer for 90 seconds, and I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to say something that you don't feel has been said in this conversation that you want to gift back to our audience. We will start with you, April.
I would like to say that as you are in this world, your story, and you're sharing your story, you never know whose life you're going to impact. Although I don't have any natural children of my own, I'm a mother of many children because I'm a school counselor. And during my diagnosis, I made it known to my whole school what I was going through. And not only did they rally around me and show support, even in the years after, I see my children posting, "Feel it on the first." I've had children come to me and want to know, well, I had one student who said, "I want to actually be on FaceTime with you when you start chemo so I can see what they're doing to you, because I care and I want to know." So you never know what impact you may have on someone, and there's never a time where someone is too young, someone is too old to share your story, but know who your audience is, know who's sitting in your front row, because everybody can't have a seat there. Some people got to be in the overflow room, or some people just got to be outside, because you've got to protect your peace at all costs and ensure that your team is right there, 10 toes down with you. So that's what I would like to share in my 90 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Miranda.
I don't know how I'm going to follow that. Geez.
You just be who you are, brilliantly and beautifully.
I think just from a practical standpoint, what I like to point out to women, or anyone really, because I have brown skin and I have a woman next to me with fair skin, if we go outside, our skin is going to react differently to the sun. So if this is just like this natural element out in the earth, and this is how it affects our bodies differently, how are these drugs going to affect the inside of our bodies differently? And it's so important to have different types of people, different skin colors, different ages, different backgrounds, different cultures, different socioeconomic levels. All of those things play into our health. And if something as simple as the sun can make such a huge difference in our skin, what are these drugs doing? And we're never going to know what these drugs do if we don't come to the table and, try to do what we can for others.
Wow. So beautiful. Yes. Thank you. Dr. Nick.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. I'll pick up on that same point, which is that representation in research is so important for everything we do. And we talked at the beginning about different ways to be part of research, including clinical trials. And I would just want to emphasize that there are many, many ways to be counted, and ranging from being a part of a clinical trial to just also sharing your information or filling out a survey or connecting with the researcher in some way, sharing your story, as April said. The kinds of things that Count Me In is trying to do, that many advocacy organizations are trying to do, is just letting people share their voice and be counted. That contributes to research, that helps with our information, that helps with us make better decisions ultimately for taking care of patients of color and of all, as Miranda said, all different types of patients. So I would just encourage people, do whatever feels comfortable, but try and find a way to be counted.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Nick. And bringing us home is our t-shirt queen. Come on, Michelle, lay us out.
What I'll end with is that we are all here for an assignment. And sometimes we get confused on what that assignment is. And for me, instead of saying why me, I say why not me. My story is much bigger than me. I might not, my story might not end well with my journey, but I know I'm making a difference to a queen behind me. And that's all that matters to me. Because at the end of the day, when I go through this journey and I go through this fight, I look at my daughter, I look at all the women that are coming behind me, I look at everyone that is in this journey, and I've realized that my fight is much bigger than me. But I also realized that, I'm seated at a lot of tables for a reason. And that's the impact and the legend and the legacy that I leave. So when, that time comes, they know that Michelle was here. And that's all that matters.
That's
to
right.
me.
That's so beautiful. Wow, this time has gone by so fast. I am honored and thankful to all of you to be able to share this space with you. Thank you again for the Breast of Us, Count Me In, and for CGen for putting on this incredible conversation. I'd like to now invite the founder of For the Breast of Us, Marissa Thomas, to join us and bring us on home.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Tammy, so much. You did a great job at moderating this panel. So thank you. To all the panelists, Michelle, Miranda, April, and Dr. Wagel, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules to lend your insight and to help, bridge the gap in clinical trials for all women of color who have been impacted by breast cancer as well. And thank you to everybody who was tuned in tonight and posed your questions and lended some of your comments in the chat. We've been watching some of those comments, so thank you so much. And thank you again to Count Me In. Without them, we could not put on this first town hall series. And then also to our partners at CGen. Thank you again so much, everybody. We really appreciate it. And one other thing that I do want to mention is that we are doing a $50 gift card giveaway for everyone who registered and attended. And so you will be receiving, if you are the winner, you'll be receiving an email announcing who the winner is. So thank you so much, everybody. Any parting words, Dr. Reverend Tammy?
I just want to make sure, because what I heard you say is that everyone that attended will get a $50 gift card. Is it that they will be entered into a drawing and one person will receive a $50 gift card? I just didn't want you to get that smoke on the other end.
Yes, I appreciate that. Yes, everyone will be entered and then one person will win the giveaway there.
Yeah, I just want to say, everybody, just stay active, stay involved, stay true to who you are. Know that you are worthy of surviving and thriving and living, living well after a breast cancer diagnosis. So educate yourself, get informed, and get in contact with any advocacy organization that represents the people that look like you. And let's fight this thing together and keep thriving. Good night, everybody. See you soon.
Good night.